Hi, everyone. Welcome to another wonderful episode of Experts Dig In with Doggies for Dementia. This is our YouTube channel program and something we really share out to the world, where we bring in experts from, you'll hear today, all over the world to tell us really wonderful information about dementia to help educate all of us, but especially for family caregivers who are learning to become caregivers and care partners. And what does that mean? Doggies for Dementia is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we use photography to help gift families, and we gift those sessions, photo sessions, to families. And the experiences are amazing. And then we share their stories so that the world can learn a little bit more about dementia. We firmly believe the world can be a much more kind, compassionate, and loving place when we know more about dementia. And given that, I am delighted to introduce our guest for today, Ruth McCabe, who is from Fife, Scotland. So never in my wildest dreams would I think I would be talking to a fellow nurse from Scotland, who is the program manager for Dementia Friendly Fife program. And we're going to learn all about that. But welcome, Ruth.
Thank you, Carmen. It was wonderful to be here. It's amazing how Zoom can connect us all over the world. It's not my favorite form of communication, but to link people up worldwide, it has been absolutely tremendous.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah. Because we wouldn't have the opportunity to meet in person right now. Someday, though, someday.
Yeah, well, one day.
I think
that would be nice.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
Yeah. So, Ruth, what can you tell us about the Dementia Friendly program? Now, Fife is the name of the town.
The area. No, Fife is it's a region in Scotland, Carmen. Our biggest towns are places like Dunfermline, Kirkcaldy, St Andrews, which you've probably heard of, which is the home of golf. And it's colloquially called the Kingdom because the kings of Scotland were all crowned in Dunfermline hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So we have the sort of name of the kingdom. But it's an area about 135 miles from one end to the other. Population about maybe 350,000.
Okay.
So not a huge area and a lot of rurality, lots of kind of country area. So small towns, lots of small villages. But the thing about Fife is it has been traditionally a mining region. So you have a lot of small communities that are very, very closely connected and still have that sense of care and support for each other. So a lovely, beautiful part of the country, surrounded by water on both sides, the River Tay on one side and the River Forth on the other. So beautiful, lots of lovely beaches. So we're blessed, actually. It's a wonderful place to be able to work. So my job is with the Fife Health and Social Care Partnership. And that's basically our local authorities, councils, working together with our health services. And my post was created in November 2018. And it was a sort of follow on from a job to make one part of Fife dementia friendly. We started with a new town called Glenrothes, and that was deemed to be really successful. So the partnership wanted to roll out the project across the whole of Fife. So that started in November 2018.
So let's stop right there and talk about, by the way, you said the B word, which would draw me there right away, beach. Love the beaches.
Lovely beaches.
Yeah. So what does that really mean, dementia friendly? Let's start with the basic.
Yeah. Well, basically what we're trying to do in Scotland and in Fife is help people to come forward much earlier to get a diagnosis of dementia. What we find is that people are still very frightened of the illness, and people think of dementia as a disease of older people, a very, very debilitating disease where people lose any kind of sense of themselves and their ability to function. And whereas that is the reality, Carmen, we know that in the advanced and terminal stages of dementia. What we believe is that if people can be diagnosed at an early stage, if we give people the right information and support, we hope that they will live well for a lot longer with the illness. and not be so frightened of it.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole campaign's about raising awareness, helping people to just talk about dementia, bring it out into the open, reduce the stigma. I mean, this week alone, I've got two people who are, it's actually two men who are struggling with their wives, who they believe the wife has got dementia. The wife doesn't want to know that situation, and they can't get the person to the doctor. So they're not getting anything in the way of support or information or guidance. And that's so typical of people in the kingdom and probably across Scotland. So basically what
Here
we're trying
too.
to do is change that. I'm sure it's
Yeah.
the same worldwide, Carmen. It's not
Yeah.
changed really.
Yeah,
So
and
basically,
understandably, because the myths you just talked about, that it's only old age primarily, and it took me by surprise, given this was my work too. I didn't realize the general thought, and you said it too about the course of the disease. Most people think that you get it and you lose your memory and your abilities right away, and then you die shortly
yeah,
after. And of course,
yeah,
that's not the case. Any of
yeah,
those aren't the
yeah,
case. And
yeah,
I think knowing those things, that would make me not want to know too,
yeah,
not
yeah,
understanding. And plus, there isn't a real cure per se that we know
yeah,
of, but we
yeah,
do know
yeah,
of ways to help preserve longer. And
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. So what we do, Carmen, locally is I basically knock on doors of businesses, organisations, and I encourage them to become dementia friendly. And it's quite a simple programme. We ask them to do two things. If they have physical premises like a building, we look round and we give them guidance on things like signage, wayfinding, colours, and we also invite them to become dementia friends, which before lockdown, we would deliver face-to-face in groups of maybe about 20 people. But with lockdown, we've created our DVD, which is basically a dementia friend session done in a movie. And if the organisation individuals do both these things, then they get a sticker, they get a window sticker to say that they're dementia friendly. And the reason behind that is that if what happens here is that often when people get a diagnosis of dementia, they shut themselves up in the house. People are very frightened to come out. Because there's a degree of unpredictability with the dementia, people find it safer to stay at home. And then the person with dementia gets bored, unstimulated. The family and friends end up devoting 24 hours a day, and there's no space for themselves or anything they want to do or enjoy. So we believe if we can make the world round about them dementia friendly, then we've got more chance that people will come out and go to the local cafe, will go to the local church, will go to the pub, to the cinema, to the theatre, go for a walk, do all the things that they would do without a diagnosis of dementia, and really basically continue their life in the best way that they can. And obviously have to make adjustments as time goes on, but do what they can for as long as they can, knowing that if they have a moment where perhaps they're not functioning fully, then someone will look out for them and support them. So that's basically what we're trying to do. So over the couple of years, we've been a bit sort of, shut down with lockdown, but we've got about 300 organisations across the kingdom who are dementia friendly, with more than 6,000 dementia friends. And we're trying still to kind of continue the programme and doing things on Zoom, and trying to connect people. But our world's beginning to open up again, so we'll be doing more face-to-face things. But it's basically quite simple. Just raise awareness, help understanding, and encourage people to talk about it and bring dementia out of the closet, basically.
Yeah.
A very similar journey to what we did with cancer. 20 years ago in this country, people wouldn't talk about cancer. They called it the big C. People never knew they had it. So we're having to do the same experience with dementia.
Yes.
And I think in Fife, we're getting there. I mean, nowhere is perfect, but I know that the people that I support who are living with the condition find it, quite straightforward to go out and do different things, because there is a high level of understanding about what might happen, and just the kind of support that's needed.
Yeah, and I want to talk more about that too, the person and the family impacted by dementia, their response. And I'm also really curious first, the businesses who say, okay, we're going to do this. Have they been and what has their response been? Because I imagine there have been some surprises that they learned things they didn't know before.
Well,
In their
very much so,
response.
Carmen. I mean, there's 5 key messages in the Dementia Friends program. So one is that it's not a natural part of aging. That's the first myth that we shatter. It's not just older people. So the fact that we've got a bunch of people under 65 who are quite articulate and able to talk for themselves, that's a huge surprise to people.
And he is, yes.
We kind of talk about, you can live well with dementia, and it's not, it's a physical disease, it's an actual disease of the brain. It's not just something that happens naturally. In that kind of sense, we encourage people constantly to look beyond the diagnosis and not define the people with the label, but actually see the person. And, we have a group of people with younger onset dementia called STAND. And as I say, they're still able, very articulate, very able, and they shatter all the stereotypes about people with dementia. I mean, a couple of them are still driving, they're helping me deliver the teaching sessions. We've done some sessions with schools, had some marvelous responses from children. So I think the fact that people with dementia can talk for themselves is hugely astonishing, because people just imagine as soon as you get a diagnosis of dementia, that's it, you're incapable of doing anything. And it's marvelous.
And some are given that message too. Go get everything in order, as if they've been delivered a death sentence, and that their time is very short, and how traumatic. On top of the stigma piece, I think the stigma piece, that's one of the things we do too, is we're work to raise awareness. As I said, we think there can be a more kind, compassionate world, and that's exactly what you're doing too. You're creating, you're creating that world in your area, which I believe just needs to be across the board, because as numbers are rising and more people are impacted, and that means too families, more and more people
Carmen,
are impacted with loved ones, or friends and families. So I had a question. So part of the program, I know because of the lockdown and things needed to be on, you said DVD. What were they doing before? Was that a classroom type education about dementia, or people went in?
An average Dementia Friend session would last an hour, Carmen. And as I say, it's quite a kind of scripted program. I've been quite unique in that I've involved people with dementia in actually delivering the sessions. So I make the key points through their stories, and that's been exceptionally powerful. And basically what we did was transfer that to DVD. I mean, it's a much better, outcome face to face, but at the end of the day, it's better than nothing. I think it's really important that, dementia friendly communities are shaped by people living with the illness. And our STAND group also involve family and friends. So they've been involved in raising awareness, doing different sessions. We've also, because of the lockdown, ended up being quite activist in relation to shaping policy and practice. So we've taken the kind of, the whole program just a kind of stage further. Quite an unexpected development, actually, and that's been the lockdown and the pandemic.
I want to talk about that for sure. You said something, and I wanted to. The integrating family and people directly impacted by dementia into the program makes such a big difference, because they could speak to it in ways that those of us who are not directly impacted cannot. And
absolutely,
with the passion and a lot of times that for them to go and do that on their own is kind of like, well, where do I begin with that? What can I do? But to participate and help others, in my experience, was life-changing for people. And the pandemic, the lockdown, I got to just say, needless to say, that we are all have a better understanding of the isolation, the impact of isolation and loneliness, and being separated from others. And so what did you see in your area with regard to that? Did you have to change up your program some, other than, I know the DVD?
Well, I mean, I have to say, we just went on Zoom. I mean, we have an organisation in the UK called DEEP, the Dementia Engagement and Empowerment Project, and our stand group is a member of DEEP. So we had met the UK coordinator just before lockdown. So Rachel basically encouraged us to have a Zoom call every week, which she helped to facilitate in the first instance. So we basically had a weekly call that was really around peer support. You know, so what we would have done face to face, we basically took on to Zoom. All the services closed. There was nowhere to go. There was nowhere to meet. We weren't allowed to go places, to meet places. Cafes were shut. Everything was shut. So the only way we could really communicate was on Zoom. The saddest thing about it has been that only about 30% of the group actually, you know, came together on Zoom. There was a whole lot of people out there who, for whatever reason, didn't want to embrace the technology. So there's only really been a core group of about 10 couples who've actually communicated quite regularly. And then when places were able to open again, we got together face to face. And we've been able to do that more since about April this year. We had a spell in the autumn last year where we got together, and then lockdown came again at Christmas. And then from April, we've been able to meet again. But basically, the whole ethos of the stand group is about peer support, people sharing information. I mean, we were out the other day, and one of the chaps that had a problem with his blister pack, you know, for his drugs. He decided it was back to front and he thought it was just him. But actually, when he spoke to the group about it, several other people had had a similar experience. So now we're on a hunt to get a proper disposal unit for drugs that's not going to confuse people. So he takes drugs in the morning that are due at nighttime and things like that. So the very nature, I mean, they have, you know, conversations about incontinence pads and, you know, goodness knows what. So that kind of sense of just that peer support and being with people who really are walking in your own shoes. I mean, I think that I've got a reasonable degree of empathy, Carmen, but I'm not living with the illness. I'm providing a degree of support, but there's no doubt that people talking to each other, whether it be another person with dementia or a family or friend talking to another family or friend, it's just magical. You know, when they get together, they get so much out of it. And thankfully, Zoom helped. I mean, it did help. In my experience, never will be enough, but it did help, you know, for that kind of time where we couldn't meet each other face to face.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And when families come together and can talk about things, that vulnerability piece that they may be not want to just tell anybody, but they tell someone who they know can understand and may be able to even help them and support one another. And then the feeling of knowing you're helping someone else too is just it's invaluable to all of us, you know, and all of us. And when for many family caregivers, they're doing it on their own with very little support, and to know that there's someone else out there that they know and it's a phone call away, you know, or a visit away, depending. I'm just trying to remember I think your kingdom is kind of like our counties, you know, and the county, how far away, and although I do like the sound of kingdom, that you know, people are nearby experiencing, and I'm with you, you know, I spent years in supporting families with dementia and have some firsthand experience, and it wasn't until I had that firsthand experience with a friend of mine who had Alzheimer's disease, who's actually younger than me. And did I really have a keen understanding? And one of the things I would always tell people, like, you've got to take care of yourself first and carve out those few minutes and things. And there were days that I didn't even feel I had 5 minutes to do that. And I was like kicking myself for saying, I'm suggesting something that I can't do myself well, and you so get it. And when I've talked to families and I'm no longer in the clinical setting, I'm in a whole different role, or even when I was sharing their stories, they told me things they never told me when I saw them in the clinic. Because they felt embarrassed, or they thought I would think they weren't doing a good job, or that I would suggest placement because they were failing, when of course what they were experiencing were like common things.
Yeah, absolutely, Carmen. I mean, one of the
Yeah.
things I think for people supporting people with dementia, I think it's people live with quite a high level of risk. So if you want to support your person with dementia being independent and, you know, doing things for themselves, there's quite a high level of risk involved in that. And that involves quite a lot of stress. So, you know, one of our lads is quite an active guy and he just hates being in the house. So, you know, he'll go away from the house. Now, they live in quite a small area. You know, he goes to the local golf club and hopefully returns. But his wife knows that there may come a day where actually he might not return. But the alternative is to keep that man locked up in the house. And that just would be impossible because his behavior would change. He wouldn't be happy. He would demonstrate that. So there's all sorts of things like, I mean, we use technology and gadgets quite a bit, but there is a high level of risk involved. I mean, one of our women still drives. Now, you know, she drives locally. You know, I know that she's quite anxious when she's driving. So her partner must kind of be quite anxious about that. But then, you know, he doesn't want to stop her. You know, he wants to allow her to do what she can do. So I think that level of risk. And then as people with dementia, you know, in some cases lose their ability to communicate. So people feel very lonely in the relationship. You know, it's like you don't have any two-way conversation anymore. There's no reciprocity. There's no, you know, and, you know, often you're the one who's making all the decisions. So that kind of stuff can be really, really challenging for family and friends.
Yeah, I
hard
feel
work.
it's hard work. And thank you for saying, I'm gonna talk about the one thing, there are caregivers, that feeling. And I don't know, the one thing I noticed is that there was a sense of being invisible or feeling invisible, that the focus, it has to be on the person who has dementia, and conversations were about that and things. And the caregiver role, no matter what they had done in their lives and were still doing, they were still that caregiver or care partner, and other things became invisible essentially. And that's a really tough thing too. And another really strong reason to for those support groups to gather and others where they see them as something beyond the caregiver. And you know, and I want to thank you for bringing up what you did about the risk and the feelings of the risk, because even that, there's that social pressure, because as I used to talk to families, I say they'll go, well, he walks, for instance, he walks to the store every day, gets the same thing and comes back. Should we stop that? And I'm like, you know, safety is the line in the sand, and the likelihood, the day you'll know that it's not safe is because it became unsafe. You know, it's hard to predict. It's oftentimes hard to predict, although you can kind of look for signs and things, because the risk of not doing those things, the harm done, is really great. But and one another great reason for your program, because I, even as a nurse practitioner, I would get calls from families, and they say, would you please talk to the person here in the store and explain, because they think that he's been drinking or he's impaired in some other way. And a lot of times the response from other people who didn't understand will go, well, they shouldn't really be letting him out like that.
Yeah, absolutely, Carmen.
And so yes, and you know, it's
so what's the alternative? You know,
what's the alternative? Or then it's time to go with someone else, which can be limiting. And to one's spirit, when you're no longer able to, it's almost like you've got a babysitter, you know, and it's a tough thing. And when people are more, and like, is for what you do, and I so applaud you for this, and your kingdom of Fife, is the Fife the kingdom, or
Fife's the kingdom?
Yeah, because I mean, that could be a lifesaver for people when they understand what's happening.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of our, you know, lots of our people live in quite small communities, and the shopkeepers generally, they might not know they've got dementia, but they know there's something not quite right. So, you know, one of the girls talks about going to the store, and if she can't manage her money very well, you know, the girls will say, look, you know, let's see what's in your purse, and they'll take out the money, or, you know, give them the right change and stuff, because you can trust people to do that. That's just makes such a difference. People go down to the chemist or whatever, and the doctors and people locally keep an eye out for folk. Not in any sort of intrusive way. I have this sort of phrase in my head called strategic lurking. So, sort of people know that perhaps folk are a little bit vulnerable. So just keep a wee eye out for them and stuff like that. And then, make sure if they see people who look like a little bit lost, go up and say, how are you today? And, can I give you a bit of a hand, and make sure people get home and things like that. That's just crucial, Carmen, to people surviving.
Yes. And community, that's a community. That's what community does.
Yeah. I mean, it's, in our case, a lot of that existed many, many years ago. We've kind of lost that. But now I think COVID in some ways is actually because people have all been living kind of, in the same place. We've hardly been moving out of our own local area. We've all been using the local shops. So people have got used to the fact that they get to know people a wee bit better. And that's actually making it easier for people with dementia to live locally. And a lot of our, there's been a lot of response around delivering shopping, walking dogs, if people are shielding and things like that. So that's just brought people together that wee bit more. So we hope that that will be sustained beyond the pandemic. And I think that's really important. But it's just about, as you say, Carmen, that kind of human understanding, that wee bit of compassion and not judging people. And thinking, well, if somebody's behaving in a way that wouldn't perhaps be perceived as normal, that they're not drunk, they're not just being belligerent, they're not high on drugs, there's something physically causing the situation, and help people to kind of just stand back and think, well, actually, what is going on here? What does that person need in the way of support, rather than kind of just walking by and dismissing them? It was really important.
Very important. I had a recent discussion with a woman who was former law enforcement, was a police officer, and she was talking about even in the, as far as patrol officers and other law enforcement, not knowing about dementia and not knowing how to manage, and what a crisis that created when things would happen, and them not knowing. And I thought, yeah, and that can happen anywhere, any place, with any of us, and how people respond. And there's a push here for children to learn about it. I've had a few children's authors, and how do you learn early? And I think you're really a pioneer in this, in what you're doing. And that's why I just had to have you on the show. So I thought, wow, here we are, fellow nurses, and you're doing something fantastic, far away from me, and we have the ability to communicate about this. And I'm sure there's some places here in the United States doing the same. I'm not aware of it in our community, although I do live in a small town, Ruth. I think it could happen.
Oh, well, the smaller the better, Carmen. I mean, there is actually a Dementia Friends session for children. We have a specific set of kit for kids that involves dressing up teddy bears and things like that, and looking at brains and, flashing fairy lights and things. So we do have a set for kids, and we had some real success before lockdown. We had about 4 different sessions with youngsters. And actually, it was amazing how much they knew already. This was like primary 7 kids. So before they go up to the high school, maybe about age 11. Marvelous experiences. And we also have something in this country, Carmen, called the Herbert Protocol. So we encourage, it's called the Herbert Protocol. So basically, if someone's got a diagnosis of dementia, we encourage the family to register the details with the local police. So they provide a profile and a photograph, so things like, where did the person live previously, in case if they disappear, they may be going to find their previous home. And they register that with the police. So if somebody like that chap I was speaking about did go missing, then they could activate that situation really quickly. And several of our local, we have one police station where all of the officers did the training. So they actually have the award. And we have other colleagues in different parts of Fife who've actually done the training individually. So we have had quite a lot of success with the local police. And that's the Herbert Protocol has just been the kind of way to open the door there. Yeah. So again, people kind of think, oh, well, the counter side to that is, oh, you're saying, so you're saying that everybody with dementia is going to wander. And what we're saying is, no, that's not the case. But if that is to happen, then at least we've got something in place. And
Right.
that's the key. So you're not in a moment of stress, trying to think about, well, where did somebody live before? It's like a sort of preventive thing. You've got the information there and it can be actioned really quickly, as opposed to thinking, well, filling in all the forums at the time. So
yeah, and that certainly happens because some of those memories are intact from the past, like where
absolutely.
was that? Yeah. Now, Ruth, did you say head back program?
It's Herbert, Herbert, Herbert. So it's a man's name, and it's named after a man, because it started off in England and it's come to Scotland now. So it's the Herbert Protocol.
Oh my goodness.
I'm sure I've got a forum, Carmen. I'll send you the forum.
Yeah, please do. I'll share that out. Because there are a lot of people who would love to contribute and do more. And I think programs like these, are really what's going to make the shift. As I said, I know there can be more compassion and more kindness. This is what we know more, we do better. That's just all. I mean, we fear what we don't know, but once we understand it, then we have a bit more control over our responses and how we do. Oh my gosh.
We're very lucky in Scotland, Carmen. We've had an organisation called the Life Changes Trust working for about the last 9 years. They were given money by the lottery in Scotland, £50 million actually.
Wow.
And they were able to spend it on services for people with dementia. And they've actually created I don't know what you would call it, a sort of manual to make places dementia friendly. So I must send you the electronic link for that. It's a hefty, it's a weighty tome because there's 5 volumes. But if you're trying to make a community dementia friendly, everything in there is what you would need.
Send it my way.
Really seriously. We've been very, very lucky in Scotland. And I have to say, if you're going to have dementia anywhere in Scotland, to have it in Fife is marvelous, because in normal times there is so much in the way of support. So many natural places like cafes and church events and groups and different activities that people can go to. This organisation just recently has funded 15 organisations in Fife to deliver dementia-friendly activities. They've invested £200,000 to £300,000 in our area, which is just phenomenal.
It really is.
A lot. It's not about research, but it's about funding social activities where people can go and enjoy things with other people. And just making life so natural for people. It's just amazing. So we've been very lucky, very lucky.
And I agree with what you said. I think the pandemic has taught us a lot about how important that is. And where maybe once some of those programs may seem a bit fluff, compared to research and other things, but it's so important for quality of life and for families to be able to thrive instead of just surviving every day kind of thing. Well, Ruth, I can't thank you enough. This has been wonderful.
Welcome, Carmen.
I think you'll have to be a guest again. And even better for me is that I would just love to come visit you.
Oh, perfect. No
to
problem.
bring, our Doggies for Dementia because what we do is we photograph families with their dogs. Because on social media and when people are looking at pictures, they'll stop to read a story when there's a cute dog.
Well, we've got 3 of our stand members have dogs, Carmen. One girl lives on her own with her wee dog called Bouncer, and Irene's got a wee dog called Montgomery, and Hilary and Richard have got Lucy, who's a Romanian rescue dog. Now, they would be absolutely delighted to have your service and support. So come away.
Yeah, you don't have to twist my arm. Yeah.
More than welcome.
Yeah, I've been
they're all Zoom dogs. maybe what we should do is get them on Zoom and bring the dogs so you could visit with them on the Zoom. That would be a nice thing to do.
That would be wonderful. It's a great start, then I'll be looking for flights. Yeah, because we are, and then we're teaching other people to do what we do, to be photographers with Doggies for Dementia, and to be part of our program. And I just love.
That'll be marvelous. Well, what an idea!
Yeah, just wonderful. Well, thank you again, and I'm going to have your contact information in the comments. So if people have other questions, and then the ones who read the comments and answer the questions right here, it's pretty much just me at my desk. And so when you write a comment or question for us, we'll be looking at that personally and happy to answer them and support in any way that we can. And
brilliant, excellent. Well, thank you for the opportunity, Carmen. That's been very interesting. So, but it would be lovely to have you to Scotland one day with your camera for our doggies. Look forward to that.
You only have to ask me once.
Perfect.
Yes. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Experts Dig In.
Bye-bye.
Don't hang up. Don't hang up.